Then there is this question of the intention to deal with negatives. Combined with anger, irritation, annoyance. So the opposite of that is loving kindness, friendliness, compassion. Any thoughts which are combined with those kind of wholesome roots are good and considered to be right intentions or right thoughts. So our thoughts should be generous and kind and friendly and non-grasping and so forth. You know, this is our original intention before we do anything. And that they should be also combined with, of course, with a certain humility, not being proud, and also not being envious. If people get things which we would have liked to have gotten ourselves, or get promoted when we think we should, instead of being upset, envious, or jealous, to rejoice in their happiness. This is a beautiful quality called mudita. And it's this quality of being happy for the happiness of others. You know, not only do we feel compassion for their suffering, but we also rejoice in the good, the nice things which happen to people. We're so happy for them, even if it was something which we might have wanted for ourselves. So instead of feeling jealous and envious, which hurts us and doesn't create any good energy, we are happy for them. Good, they're happy, so I'm happy. So these qualities, which we all know, I mean, it's not specifically Buddhist, anybody can know. To be a good person is to be someone who is kind and generous and compassionate and happy for the happiness of others and not proud and so forth. So all these good intentions, it is considered that our karma, the Buddha said that karma, which means actions, he said karma is intention. In other words, it's not exactly what we do, but why we do it. The underlying motivation behind our actions and our speech. I mean, a very obvious, silly, but clear example would be if a murderer took a scalpel with anger and aggression and plunged it into somebody's heart with the intention of killing them and harming them, and that person dies, then obviously, you know, that's one thing. Or a skilled surgeon would take same scalpel and likewise put it in the heart of someone who has a heart disease with the intention of trying to help them and cure them. But the patient dies anyway. So you have the same action with the same implement and the same result. But the intention was completely different. In one, the intention was to kill and to harm. The other, the intention was to heal and to help them to recover. And although the result was the same and the action was almost the same, the intention being completely different, the karmic results would be completely different also. So it's not what we do, but why we do it. What is the underlying motivation and intention behind what we do? This is why intention is very important. Because we might do something which looks very, very good, but it's the ulterior motive is not something good. Or we might do something which looks quite harmful, but the motivation is to be helpful. And so it's not just what we do, but why we do it. That's very, very important. And it's what creates the karmic results, whether they're bad seeds or good seeds, depends on your intention, not just the action. So intention is very important. Then the next, coming from that, is right speech. And a speech is considered to be samyak, perfect speech, if, first of all, of course, it is truthful. But not just truthful, it should also be kind. Some people love telling the truth, but they only tell truths which hurt. That's not right speech. It should be truthful, so people can trust us. We are telling them the truth as far as we know it. It should be kind and helpful. It should not be divisive. Divisive means like you have two friends coming together and then you tell each one something against the other one to bring them into conflict, or in a community. Very important in a community not to engage in divisive talk. To split the community is considered very karmically heavy. To bring the community together in harmony, any community in harmony, is considered very, very important. The Buddha talked about it again and again and again. The importance of the community living in harmony. And a lot of the monastic code deals with how to live together as a community in harmony with each other and not be divisive. And so in our families, among our friends, in our workplace, in our Dharma communities, to bring people together in harmony and love, and not saying things which will divide one against the other, even if it's true. To be very careful not to create problems with our speech. Human beings are the one animal which communicate through languages. Of course, other animals communicate, but they don't communicate through the clunkiness of language. And even plants communicate, but they have their own very much more subtle way of communicating. Human beings rely on language, which brings us together and divides us both. But because we do have language, therefore we are responsible for our speech. And people are very hurt by language, more even than by physical brutality. Verbal brutality can cause much more harm. In the Tibetan tradition, they have, we say sticks and stones may break your bones, but words can never harm me. The Tibetans more or less say sticks and stones only break your bones, but harsh words can tear a man's heart to pieces. Isn't this true? So we should put a guard on our tongue. And be very careful what we say, not just the words, but the tone. I mean, we can say, but I only said da 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 da, but that was not the way it was said. And so we should be very, very careful with our speech. Our speech should be truthful, so people can trust us, that we're not cheating anyone, we're not telling things which are not true. But at the same time, they should be kind and helpful if possible. Sometimes we have to say things which seem like unkind, but nonetheless, if it's intended to help, then we have to say it. But not just to be unkind for unkind. This is why we need to really look at our intentions. And also not a lot of garrulous chatter. Some people just blah, 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 blah. Just distraction, distraction, distraction. Just repeating what's in your head. Who needs it? So, to be conscious of our speech and the effect it will have on others. Parents also, to be careful what you say to your children. because, if we speak harshly, sometimes children carry this all their life, this low self-image. A lot of it comes from early childhood speech, which they heard, especially from their parents, who loved them, but, were trying to encourage them, but encouraging them by putting them down, and that doesn't encourage. And so a lot of children are damaged through hearing harsh talk directed towards themselves or towards the parents, to each other, and so forth like this. We should be very careful. And then the next is right action, or perfect action, which again means any action which does not harm. Buddhist ethics is based on non-harming, in Sanskrit ahimsa. And so all of at least for lay people in Buddhist countries, they usually maintain what are called the 5 precepts. And this constitutes right action as far as it goes. These 5 precepts are, first of all, not to take life. That means not killing. In Buddhism, basic ethical conduct is not really, it's really not much to do with sex. Unlike in certain other spiritual traditions where if someone is called immoral, it means they're sleeping around. In Buddhism, they're not really that much. Monks and nuns are celibate, and everybody else, they have their own conduct, but it's a very social conduct. But when the idea of somebody being really ethical and good has much more to do with not harming, not killing, not stealing, and not being verbally abusive. It's much more the sense of living in harmony in the community. So I think in this day and age, we have to really think about this whole question of non-harming. And also perhaps in its role with what we eat. Buddhists are not necessarily vegetarians. The Buddha himself and his monks went through the streets and they had to accept whatever food was given them. They were not to be discriminating in any way. I mean, you can't say, I'm so sorry, please don't put that in my bowl, I'm gluten intolerant. You ate what you got. And so therefore people would give what was left over. In the old days they gave, now of course they cook specially, but before they would just give what was left over. And so you ate whatever you were given. And so likewise in the Theravadan tradition, up until today, the people, lay people and monks and nuns also are not necessarily vegetarian, although there is now more of a movement for that, especially started by the nuns. In the Mahayana tradition of China, Korea, Vietnam, and so forth, then in the Mahayana sutras, there are sutras which speak out very strongly against eating meat. Because they said, how can we talk about not harming and then sit down, and the idea that all beings are we are interconnected with all beings, and then sit down and eat them. And so in the Mahayana traditions of China and Vietnam and so forth, the Buddhists, and especially the Sangha, are strictly vegetarian. They also don't take eggs. And since they usually also don't have a lactate diet traditionally, the Chinese and those cultures, they don't take milk. So mostly they're vegan because they wouldn't take milk and cheese anyway. It's not part of their culture. And they don't take meat and fish and eggs, and so they're basically a vegan culture. The Tibetans, because they lived in a very high altitude and there wasn't too much that grew there, were usually quite carnivorous. There are some very great lamas who were vegetarian, but such as Patrul Rinpoche and Shabka and so forth. But of course, I appreciate it was quite difficult. You had a very restricted diet as a result because they didn't grow many vegetables, and there wasn't that much to eat if you didn't take meat. But now, living in a society like this, where there is everything to partake of, there is simply no excuse. If one is serious, especially on the Bodhisattva path, if we talk about all sentient beings as our mother, and that how much we share with animals. Animals are intelligent. Animals have feelings. Anybody who has a cat or dog knows it's not an, it's not a, it's a being. It has feelings. It has loves. It has fears. It has sadness. It has joy. People love their animals because the animals are so loyal in their love. They know that even if you get up one day and you're really grumpy, your dog won't divorce you. Your dog will love you no matter what, forever, to the last breath. Recently I was reading a book in which one of the antagonists, one of the bad ones, was wearing these shoes made with the skin of little baby seals. And so the author, in the voice of the goodies, was saying, oh, how terrible that was, and these poor little seals, and how brutal to murder these poor little seals, da-da-da-da-da. And then they all went off and had lamb cutlets for lunch. And I didn't see that there was a slight hypocrisy there. What difference between baby seals and baby lambs? Or baby calves crying for their mother? And we know the meat industry is horrific. But by buying meat, we are supporting it. And how can we support it and at the same time say that we have universal compassion for all beings? It's hypocritical. If you want to eat meat, but don't talk about compassion for all beings. Those beings feel. They're terrified. And they have to produce little babies, and then they're separated from their babies. And I mean, imagine if that was your babies. They're also feeling. They're also mothers. Animal mothers protect their young with their lives, just as you would. They're not blanks. They're beings. And we've probably been reborn as in animal realm. Endlessly. And even not. Our way we treat beings on this planet, the karma we make just from what we eat, no wonder there's so many wars. No wonder there's so much suffering. No wonder there's so much sickness in the world. We're not making a karma for peace and happiness and well-being. We're just not. And all of us are guilty if we partake of that industry. Just because you go into a supermarket and it's all nicely packaged up doesn't mean it's not been a human being, a being which cared for its own life and didn't want to die any more than we do. And if we buy it and we eat it, then we are saying, it's okay. I think this is a good thing. Anyway. So this all has to do with this first precept of not harming, not killing, not being part of that industry which harms and kills, including the military industry. Then the next precept is about not taking that which is not given, which means stealing. And also I would say it includes when we borrow things, that we should give them back. Books, DVDs. In as good a condition as we got them in. So we should take care of others' property if we borrow it and give it back promptly. And I mean, these are very obvious things. The third precept has to do with sexual misconduct. And in general, that again means not using our sexual, and of course, monks and nuns are celibate, so that solves that. But for other people, it means not using our sexuality in any way which could cause possible harm to ourselves or to others. So, for example, if you are in a marriage, to be faithful and not cause any suffering for your partners or for your wives, and in general to be responsible and grow up. You know, I mean, these adult clubs, you're joking. What could be more juvenile? I mean, pathetic. Pathetic. Come on, guys. Oh. Really? So to be responsible about our sexuality and not using it to exploit anyone in any way or degrade them in any way. Or degrade ourselves. Basically, the Buddhist idea on sexuality is that just that we really should use our sexuality in a totally adult, genuinely adult and responsible manner, which causes no harm or hurt to anybody. Then the next one is about speech, which we have already dealt with, that our speech should be truthful, kind, and non-divisive and relevant, not just a lot of meaningless chatter and gossip. And the fifth precept is about alcohol and drugs. In Buddhism, of course, the main emphasis has always been on the mind, on creating a mind which is clear and aware and conscious, because we have to make decisions for our speech and our actions coming from the mind. So we should be in charge of the mind. We should be in control of the mind rather than being slaves to our mind. And of course, alcohol and drugs go counter to that. People, when they are inebriated, do things which they would never do if they were sober. I mean, there is, to be honest, there is some discussion, especially in the West, about what that actually means. Maybe a glass of wine at dinner doesn't count. So, you know, killing a few mosquitoes and mice doesn't count. But everybody say, well, of course it counts. You can't kill mice and mosquitoes just because, you know, a few casual killings don't count, you know. So why can you say a few glasses of wine at dinner don't count? But other people say, oh, well, you know. People like Thich Nhat Hanh and others say non-alcohol means non-alcohol. And that's what the Buddha said, and he didn't say, well, a little glass of wine at lunch doesn't matter. Other people say, well, it means, you know, taking a little, but not so that it affects the mind. But, I mean, who can say who's... Other people think, oh, they're gone. And you think, oh, I'm fine, I can take a few more. So, but the idea is always that we should... Our conduct should be such that our lives are blameless as much as possible, that we have no regrets about our conduct, that we can, as much as we possibly can, we try to live a life which creates no problems for ourselves or for others. These are precepts. They are rules of training. They are not commandments. There's no Buddha in the sky that's going to come down with a thunderbolt to bash us, and we are not, judged at the end. We judge ourselves through our karma. But this is, so if we do break a precept, then we feel sorry, we feel remorse, I'm sorry I did that. And we make an internal vow to not try to repeat that again and do better next time, and so forth. It's not that we have to get caught up in a big guilt trip. None of us are perfect. If we were so perfect, we wouldn't need Dharma. It's because we're not perfect, because we all have faults, because we always fall down, that we need a path. If we were so wonderful, we wouldn't need a path, but we do. So of course we're going to make mistakes. Of course we're going to do things. We should go this way, we go that way. Never mind. Try again next time. I always think of it like little children, when they're little toddlers, and their legs are very weak. And so they support themselves and they walk 1 or 2 steps and they fall down. And then they pull themselves up again and walk another couple of steps and fall down. Up. They never fall down and say, okay, clearly I'm never going to get this. My legs, look at them. Yeah, they've got strong legs. Me, look at my legs. I'm hopeless case, useless. I'll never learn to walk. I'm just not going to even bother. Forget it. I'm going to be a crawler throughout life. Babies don't think like that. They're not that stupid. They can walk, I can walk. However many times they fall down, they just get up again. And gradually, every time, their legs are just that little bit stronger, until in the end they're just racing around everywhere. But that's the point. However many times we fall down, ethically, we pull ourselves up again and keep walking. Don't give up. Like the straw man in The Wizard of Oz, right? He keeps falling. And he just lifts himself up again and walks on and then falls down and lifts himself up. So we're all straw men, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. We all have Buddha nature. Let's not forget that. Inherently, we're perfect. Our potential is beyond thought. So we don't have to identify with our weaknesses. We can see them, acknowledge them, and say, well, that's going to be my strength. I'm going to work on that. It's like going to a gymnasium. The trainer looks at you and he says, well, your arms are not bad, but your legs, ugh, what a bunch of flab. Okay. So we're going to get working on those legs. And, in the beginning it's difficult, but in the end we end up with very strong legs. You can run the marathon. This is what is our main problem is also going to be our main achievement. That's what we're going to work on. There are parts which are easy, and that's good. Parts which are difficult, and that's the bit we're going to concentrate on. So, ethics is non-harming in body, speech, and in mind. Living in this world harmlessly. If the world could just keep the basic 5 precepts, this would be such a different world. Just basic. It's nothing about being Buddhist. It's nothing about, well, this was relevant 2,500 years ago, but doesn't count nowadays in Sydney. It's just about how to live a basic, decent human life, which causes the least possible harm to others. Just that much. Even if we don't do any good, at least we can not do any harm. Anybody.